Hi everybody, welcome to Sprague Woodturning. My name is Jim. If you haven't been here before, this is predominantly a turning channel where each and every week I show people how to make things on the lathe. This week I'm going to be working with two pieces of maple, and the plan at this stage is to put them natural edge to natural edge, and it's either going to be an enclosed bowl or a hollow form, but we're going to change the orientation up on it, and it should give us a different look than we usually get when I do these pieces. So first things first, we got to round these. So let's go to the bandsaw so that we can get them to fit our bucket, get some epoxy poured. So thank you for taking the time to click on the thumbnail and stop in, especially if there's new people, which there is each and every week. So welcome. This is a circle cutting jig that I made a video on, probably 2 years ago now, maybe even longer than that. The years kind of all seem to blend into each other here after a while, and it works well. Probably the hardest part is trying to locate the hole when you drop the piece of wood onto the pin. That's probably the hardest part of using this jig. One thing to keep in mind when you are rounding wood on a bandsaw, if your saw blade is starting to get dull, it will really wander, and it's not going to give you a true round cut. So you really shouldn't do this unless you're using a brand new, well, not brand new, but a sharp bandsaw blade. Now, honestly, this bark is on here very well. But as I've said numerous times, it's never a good idea to leave bark on your pieces, especially when they're going to be joined together in this orientation. So we're going to do our best to remove all the bark. So if you missed last week's video, I did do a video on a bark casting. I took a bunch of maple bark, put it in a bucket, threw a bunch of epoxy in, and it actually panned out very nice, I must say. I'm a little disappointed in the video's performance. I think it's got something to do with the thumbnail, so I may change the thumbnail up on that and see if we can get a better boost in views in it, because I thought for sure that this was going to be a real successful video. A lot of people, well, not a lot of people, there's a few people that asked, hey, if you can cast bark, then why do we have to take it off of these pieces? And the issue is the bond between the bark and the wood. Not if you're just combining bark pieces to bark pieces, then that's no problem. But in this case, we're worried about the bond between the bark and the wood. I figure we might as well hold on to this bark. You never know, maybe we'll do another bark casting. So if you did miss last week's video, I will link it at the end of this video, maybe with an updated thumbnail too. But anyway, after we've got the vast majority of this bark off, and once I started hammering this off, it really wasn't on there all that great. Now, with the combination of a vacuum chamber and a pressure pot, yeah, maybe you could leave the bark on, but I always look at these things as you're dumping a lot of epoxy in here that's, well, they're not giving it away, and you definitely want a successful turning. So I'm going to glue the bottom one down in the bucket, because if you don't do this, if you're new to resin casting, then it's going to float. And I just decided to take a bolt and stick it in the hole that I used on the circle cutting jig to hold this piece where I want it. I did miss the size. I didn't tilt the bandsaw because these buckets have a taper. Then of course there's that, and it also should have been a little larger because it gets larger near the top of the bucket. Where there's a will, there is a way. Now I certainly could have put a spacer down below, but of course it's all uneven down there, and probably the best way to do that would be to use a drill press, but I thought this method would work too. There, I'll let that glue harden up, then I'll cut this off. This can probably come out now. Yep. All right. Anyway, while that's hardening up, let's mix up some epoxy. This week we're using deep casting epoxy from Designer Epoxy. Put a lot more epoxy in here than I wanted to, and I think, the biggest issue was the fact that the pieces of wood didn't fit tight in the bucket. We haven't used Blue Laguna in quite some time, so I think it'll look good in this casting. This originally was one of my most favorite colors that I really like to work with. Sapphire blue has taken over from that, but I would say the Blue Laguna is a real close second as far as blues are concerned. Here's the first 1.5 liters. And I have no idea how much this is going to take. Take 2 of them for sure. Be right back. Here's another 1.5 liters. Yes, sir. I did not think that it would take that much. I'll do one more and I'll be right back. All right, I am going to put this in the vacuum chamber. Before I do that though, I think I'll put some tape. There's a crack here that I can see. And hopefully that's all that there is. You don't see any other ones. And that will give us a little more height as far as bubbling is concerned. So just let me do that and I'll be right back. All right, let's see how we do here. Shouldn't take too long, I wouldn't think. Two solid pieces of wood, so let's see. We're working with 2 fairly solid pieces of wood, so we're not really so much filling any punky areas this week. There was one area that I don't know what was going on in there, had maybe a small bark inclusion near the top on this piece, but there was a lot of cracks in this piece, so that's the main reason for using the vacuum chamber. Yes, I might have been able to just throw this in the pressure pot, it may have been fine, but why risk it when I have both on hand? All right, that's full vacuum. I'm going to keep doing this for probably a good solid half hour, and I'll bring you back when we're ready to go in the pressure pot. That's been a half hour. I don't think we need to have it in there any longer than that. As you can see, there's hardly any bubbles coming up now. Just let me get this out of here. So like it always is with these types of castings, I'm really concerned about that resin level dropping off and then opening, where the 2 pieces come together. I really do not want this epoxy to drop off that far that we see, below that. If it drops off maybe a 1/2 inch, that's fine, but below that, then it's a major issue. So I've mixed up another 3/4 liter, and I'm really hoping that this is going to do it, but we'll see. I may open this up tomorrow. I am going to throw this in the pressure pot. So I'll open it up tomorrow and have a look at it. Make sure that, that it hasn't dropped off so far that it's an issue. And if it is, I'll add more epoxy then. Other than that, if it doesn't, we'll see you guys in there in 72 hours. Oh, if I can get this in there without spilling it, that would be nice. Okay, well, it is the next day. I see way down in there, that epoxy level has disappeared. So, I'm not exactly sure, I thought I had lots of reserve on the top of this. I took one of these wooden skewers, and poked down into the epoxy, and it's hard, but it has dropped well below where the opening is inside here. So now we're gonna have to do another pour, but I'm just hoping that there's not going to be thermal cracking, but it's still soft enough that I can push this into it just a tiny little bit. So what I think I'll do is just mix up some art cast, and might as well, I'm not even going to do the same color. I'm going to do a different color, and it may work out just fine the way that I want to turn this, but I guess we'll find out here. So anyway, let me get set up here and we'll mix up some art cast. Very, very hard to tell how much I need. So yes, I could have used more deep cast, didn't see the need for it. It was a bit of a risk on how much I put in here. It could have thermal cracked, but it didn't. And the only thing that I try to stay away from is mechanical mixing. I like to stick to hand mixing. Gonna go with Diamond Gold. The main reason why I like to mix this by hand is because it's a 1-to-1. It's a little thicker and you can really introduce a lot of bubbles in the epoxy when you're mixing it. So this is 24 ounces, which is almost 3/4 of a liter. This has been sealed now from the epoxy from yesterday. Yeah, ordinarily I wouldn't be able to do this with deep cast the next day, so a little worried about thermal cracking. I guess we'll find out in the end here. So I'm hoping that it's not going to really absorb a whole lot of this epoxy. And this is all we're going to need, hopefully. All right, I'll mix some more up and I'll be right back. Here's another 24 ounces. There, that should be lots. Let's hope. All right, I will throw this back into the pressure pot. The good thing with this is, I don't know, I might leave it still a couple more days, but I don't know. I might pull it out tomorrow to see what we're looking at and have a look if we need to fix any thermal cracking. I will burn some bubbles off here. Just give me a second. All right, let's hope if there is any thermal cracks down inside that it's all exposed. And this will be filling them as we speak. Regardless, see you tomorrow or the next day. Oh yeah, let's get some weight to it. Well, good morning. I don't know if we're going to do, well, we're not going to do anything with this today other than get it out of here. And hopefully we're not going to see any thermal cracking, and hopefully it's cured enough to come out. I know that this is, but we still got that deep cast down here, so could be an issue. But anyway, let's see if we can get it out and see what we're looking at. I think I need to get a new casting bucket. You'll see it takes quite a bit of effort to get it out of here. And I think that's just, you know, once these buckets get marked up with the screwdriver driving down into it, and it creates little channels that the epoxy can hold on to. And then, of course, it makes them hard to get out. So, but I had to break off those pieces of wood first, or else I wasn't going to be able to get them out. And just chucking it on the floor, yeah, more solid surface seems to work reasonably well, especially when you drop it from a tall height. There we go. Well, I guess it's very much Ukrainian flag colors. Interesting how it went down in here. I can tell that it's, I don't know, I probably could put it on the lathe today, but I think it's probably best to leave it another day. You know, I don't see any thermal cracking. Unfortunately, if there is, it's probably going to be down in this area where the big void is between the two halves. Anyway, I'm just going to leave that for, oh, what's this here? Let's open that up. That's nothing there. Don't need to worry about that. That'll be all turned away. All right, well, anyway, I guess I'm going to leave this till tomorrow. And we'll figure out exactly what we're going to do with this. I'm really surprised that after being under vacuum for so long that that the level dropped off so far when it was well above this. Again, the epoxy's always in charge. So I'm going to change up the orientation on this. So I'm going to cut a flat spot on the bottom of this, change it up from what it normally is, and I'm going to round this. Now this is a little sketchy. There's a lot of blade exposed. There is a possibility that it could turn into the blade, so you have to be aware of these things. I probably should have put a little wedge underneath of it to help it stay more upright. But it seemed to work just fine, actually. Now, the one thing that I'm going to definitely do here is make some countersinks for the drive center and the live center. We definitely want to make sure that that happens, so we're not just relying on the epoxy externally to hold this piece. Well, it's a little out of balance, but I don't know, there's not much you can do about it. So that looks like it might be off a little bit. Hold on a second. It's actually off almost a half an inch, so we'll have to fix that. Yeah, that's a lot better. And that is why I wear a glove when I initially start turning these pieces. Once they're round and there's less likelihood of big chunks of epoxy like that coming off and hitting you, then usually I'll drop the gloves, because wood turning is a feel thing, and you need a good sense of touch when you're working with these tools. Getting feedback from the tool is an important thing, and you can't really do that if you're wearing gloves. So people like to see these real panned out views, give you a nice idea of the shop. Yeah, so I haven't done this in a long time, so I probably think that this video would be a good video for it, and that's just to introduce myself to the new people that have arrived here. Really, I probably haven't done this in over a year now, but I'm a turner that lives in Eastern Canada in the province of New Brunswick, and I am a retired member of the Canadian Armed Forces. I did 24 years in the Canadian Army, 5 years in the infantry, and then 19 as a mechanic after that. And I'm self-taught. I did wood turning when I was serving, and along the way really picked up an addiction to this and absolutely love turning. And I seen it back in those days to help supplement my income, which it did. And it was just something that I was really drawn to. I've never had a class. Back in those days, VHS tapes, CDs, and books was where you got your knowledge. This was prior to YouTube, and so along the way I made a lot of mistakes, and I didn't really have a mentor per se that I could go to help me with these things, as YouTube wasn't really a thing then. And back in those days, I certainly didn't have the money to take a professional wood turning course either. So I'm self-taught, just pointing out where that little hole was drilled for the circle cutting jig. So it was a lot of trial and error. It really was a lot of frustrating days, and eventually my skills improved. When I retired from the Army in 2012, I did basically the Jury to Art show in the province of Ontario. And when the big world event happened, the vid happened, that shut all of them shows down, and it basically forced me into YouTube. And I'm so glad that it did. I mean, it's been a very welcoming, rewarding experience coming here to YouTube. Yeah, being a content creator at times can be draining. It also can be frustrating. But in the end, I just can't imagine doing anything else different now. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm married with 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. Basically, all of our kids are moved out of the house and living in other parts of Canada. Yeah, I mean that's me. And we are building a new house. I will be doing another video series on the house. And if you're new to the channel, there is one on the workshop. you can find that in the playlist on my channel. So thanks to the new people that have joined or have subscribed. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, I really do. I really wish that you would. That way that we can give more stuff away. I usually do giveaways at every 5,000 subscribers, but you know, the last little while here, it actually been pretty slow. So the more subs we get on board, the more stuff I can give away. So while I was yakking away there, I should mention that we are using the number 3 Hercules from Hunter Tool Systems, and there's a link in the description. Get 10% off for your next order if you're interested in getting one of these. And still kind of in the trimming stages here. Kind of struggled with this one, to be honest with you, as to what direction I was going to take this in and what profile. I do find that working on the base, getting that done first, or just starting to shape it, a lot of times will help me figure out exactly what I want to do. You might hear the furnace running there in the background. Yeah, I don't know what to do. Well, I've got an idea, and we'll have to see how it goes here, but I'm just thinking about kind of doming this a little bit with a small opening. Kind of make this almost barrel looking, maybe. This foot is going to get a lot smaller than that. I don't know. It's again, I'm just going to kind of wing it in whatever kind of form comes to me. But you know, it's going to be cut down to at least here. So, you know, we're going to lose a lot of this. And I know that ordinarily I keep kind of this natural edge from the bucket in most of these that I've done, or I think all of them that I've done. But we're not going to do that this time. We're going to get rid of that. I don't like all this epoxy sitting on top, so that's got to go. I know there's going to be some people that are probably not going to agree with that, but you know, what do you do with this piece of cedar that's in there? So it's got to go. That's all there is to it. This down here is way too big, so we'll be shaping this down a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. We'll just see how it goes here, and well, maybe I'll change my mind along the way. It's just, if you've been around for a while here, that's just the way it is with me. I love the freedom of throwing these pieces on the lathe and just doing whatever I want to do with them. This is one of the reasons why I never put spacers in my work unless I have a clear cut plan as to what I'm going to do with that piece. I don't put spacers in here because then you're compelled to go in that direction. So that's why I see it almost every week. How come you didn't put a spacer in there to take up some of this epoxy space? You're wasting epoxy. Well, that's why. With a solid blank with epoxy and wood, I have the complete freedom to do whatever I want with this, but you know, I understand why people would want to see maybe that stuff in there, but for me, I like the fact that there's nothing in here and I can do whatever I want. So with that said, we'll move on to just shaping the bottom. You know, again, it's just kind of one of these things where, I don't know, sometimes it really just comes to me naturally and I don't have any issues with it. But this one here, I'm just kind of stalling and taking my time and working on this foot area because, you know, I don't really know for sure what direction that I want to go in, other than the fact that I want to lose that kind of natural edge top that we've got, like I said earlier. So, you know, I'll get a tenon on this. I'm going to incorporate the tenon on this. I figure it's plenty deep as it is. And we'll throw that in the chuck, and it'll be a lot safer in the chuck as well after that. And then hopefully, you know, a little bit of inspiration will come to me as I'm doing that. That's a parting tool from Crown. Just cutting in the dovetail. I am using dovetail jaws. Since switching to them, I haven't had a piece come off the lathe, so I really do recommend using dovetail jaws. The only issue when you have incorporated tenons like I'm using here, and not a glued on tenon, is that this epoxy isn't fully cured. So overnight, it will, with that clamping pressure in the chuck, it will loosen. So it's important to check your chucks every day, maybe even multiple times a day as you're working on stuff like this. I think I may mention that a little bit earlier or later, sorry. So it's one of the big things that it's nice to be able to have a tenon that you know is not going to break off. It's, you know, the glue joint isn't going to fail, but I do find that it's harder to get a bite onto because it's usually harder than any of the soft hardwood glue blocks that I use. So that's another consideration. So you can't really get a real good bite into it because the epoxy has really made that wood hard. And you can see on the end grain how much resin staining there is. And there's a fair bit. This was out of balance. I think that all I could do was 475. And I believe the reason for that is one of those halves, of course, was submerged in the epoxy the whole time. And you can tell that there's more resin staining or epoxy staining on one of them than there is on the other. So that's going to throw the balance off. So it was a bit of a struggle. Yeah, you can really see how one is lighter and one is darker. And that's the reason why I couldn't really go much above that. Even after thinning it out, it still wanted to vibrate. So you're going to see me, take a few more cuts up here, maybe look at a little collar or something along those lines. Again, I'm just figuring this out as I go. One thing that's really changed in my turning is I used to want pristine, clean logs and, with no knots and voids. And now the gnarlier, the better. And that one piece that's going around the top shows it. So as you watch me use the Hercules here, I'll just briefly talk about it. If you're relatively new here, you haven't really seen this tool before, there's the number 1 and the number 3 Hercules. I prefer the more robust number 3. And the great thing about this tool is that if you're familiar with the use of a gouge, the transition to this tool should be very easy for you. Most of the cuts are the same. You ride the bevel like you do on a gouge, so it's very user friendly, and really so glad it was suggested in the comments to get one. I haven't looked back since buying it. As far as house updates are concerned, because it's another common question that we get, they were supposed to come in and dig the hole this week, and it never happened. Apparently, the company is held up doing other things, so I get that. Man, I asked my builder today. He said, yeah, we're all good for windows and doors. But I asked him, when are we digging the hole? And so anyway, it's supposed to be next Wednesday. That's when they're coming in to dig the hole. I believe, if I heard him correctly, that they're actually going to be doing the concrete work on Thursday. So that may be one reason why they have to have the hole dug on Wednesday. Anyway, that's what we're hoping for, so that we can get this on the go and we can get into our own home again. My wife and I have, for the most part, put our lives on hold here for 3 years since we decided to sell the house. It took a little longer than maybe it should have, and which really still kind of surprises me. But anyway, that time frame, waiting for the house to sell, and then of course the move down here. I mean, it's been just a crazy busy year building the new workshop. Yeah, we are so looking forward to getting back into our own home. And my father-in-law has graciously allowed us to stay here, so we definitely thank him for that. But it's I want to be the king of my own castle again. I love routine. I think most soldiers like routine stuff. But getting back into a normal routine and just not kind of being pulled in different directions and, worried about construction things and what's happening there. And so, I'm just really, and I know my wife is probably even worse than I am. We're getting there, and, the end is you know, the finish line is there. We can see it. So it's just a matter of getting there and, you know, limiting how many arguments you have with your wife along the way, because that is definitely a thing, believe it or not. Well, honestly, it wasn't the form I was had in my head. I might still lose this detail and just come straight out. I don't know, might stay, it'll stay for now, but, and I think I want the foot just a little bit smaller too, but, you know, I'll probably address this after it's been hollowed and it survives. I don't want to put a ton of time into the outside of this until we get through the hollowing process. So I'm going to set up the steady rest and we will drill this out, and that'll probably be it for today. And then I'll get the hollowing rig set up and get the inside taken out. So I'm going to start drilling this at 1.25 inches, and then I think I go up to 2-inch. So when it comes to pieces like this, of course, when you're hollowing that, I might even talk about this last week, hollowing is the big risk here. And if your project's going to fail, it's probably going to happen during the hollowing process. So, you know, get your rough form, rough-ish finished dimension form on the outside done. Don't bother with, you can see all kinds of tool marks in it. I don't really care. I just want to get this hollowed. Then we can pretty up the outside once we know for sure that we haven't wasted our time, because this wants to go off the lathe and explode into a million pieces, because nobody wants that. We are all set up and ready for hollowing. This is the captive system from oneway.ca with my modified laser setup. And of course, we're going to use a straight boring bar. This is the retrofit tool from Hunter Tool Systems. Of course, here's the steady rest. I wouldn't think about doing this with a steady rest. People keep asking about this. It was made by my son in high school. I just kind of sketched something out and he built it for me. So that's where it comes from. Sorry, I don't have any plans for it. Yeah, I guess that's it. We'll use the laser here in a little bit, but you know, we've got lots of thickness, so I'm not really too concerned about it right now. Let's see how we do. So the main goal right now is just to open up a lot of space in the form so that we don't have to shut the lathe off every 10 seconds to clear the chips away. I am able to use the straight boring bar for this entire turning, so that's fantastic. I really prefer to use this big boring bar if I can. It doesn't vibrate as much as the thinner bent boring bars that they have. I do intend on actually making bent large 1-inch boring bars for the system, or developing a very robust system after the house is built and I can get kind of my machine shop area set up in the garage, the parking garage for the house. I plan on moving all of my welding materials over there, and anything involving grinding and metal work will be done in there. It's not a good idea to do that in a wood workshop. One spark lands into some sawdust and you don't catch it, well, that could be the end of your workshop. So it's always best to keep that away, or do it outside away from the interior of your workshop when you're involving wood anyway. So anyway, that will be a thing later on down the road for sure. And I might even, make a video on that as well. So, just going to take some finishing cuts here. Well, we're gonna use the Trent Boss scraper here yet, but we're getting down to kind of the finished thickness that I'm looking for, which is typically 1/2 inch in that neighborhood. It's funny that I bought a DeWalt shop vac, and I think it lasted maybe about 6 weeks. I'm using an old Craftsman shop vac here that's got to be 30 years. It's got to be 30 years old. All right, I'm just going to hook up this endoscope that I got from Craig in North Carolina, and I'll be right back. So like last week, I'm going to try to be as smooth as I can so that people don't get motion sickness. Yeah, this one isn't cut as clean as last week's bark one. There's the very bottom center. So we go to the right here. Yeah, the scraper is definitely going to be needed here. A lot of ridges left behind. Scraper will definitely take care of those. Here's the other side. No real big tear out, which is the big problem. So if you don't have any tear out, then you're laughing. Yeah, so that endoscope is a real cool piece of kit. Thanks again, Craig, for that. I do appreciate it. And while I didn't show it, and it's probably not the best camera angle to show it anyway, I am using the Trent Bosch scraper here, the large 3/4 one. Just trying to be as smooth as I can. That way we can knock down those little ridges that remain. Yeah, there you can see the scraper there. It is like a teardrop type scraper. I'm not bothering with the laser at this point, as I'm just taking off small amounts, not large amounts at all. So there should be no need for the laser, unless you're trying to get down to a final thickness. But this scraper really does work well. And thanks again to John Tully for sending me this. I do appreciate that. Right, here's what it looks like after the scraper. And I never noticed it, but there's a big void, big bubble right down there. I never seen that on the first time you use this. It's quite large. Definitely a lot cleaner cut now. Yeah, I must say the camera quality is not bad. It's not bad at all. So we can do a little bit of trimming on the outside here, and then we'll get to sanding. Then I'll bring up the tailstock and support this. We'll trim the outside and sand it. Get our epoxy coat on. So of course you want to trim this all up before you start sanding. Now the interior of this piece is running true, so by truing up the collar on the outside here, when we bring up that cone, we know that it's all supported well and will be running true. Those are the 3.5-inch stipple discs from sandpaper.ca. That one went flying, so I had to go get it and put it back on. So I've got them mounted on a 1-inch sanding pad, and that of course allows it to wrap around, and you can sand those sidewalls quite easily in that regard. You have to be really careful out by those wheels. If you happen to get your finger close to those, you'll probably regret your occupation choices. So believe me, when I was sticking my fingers in there to use that hard straight paper to try and flatten out an area, I was thinking, man, I do not want to get my thumb pinched in here, because I'll probably going to regret that. So I sand it from 60 to 180 because of course we're going to do an epoxy coat. It definitely needs it, especially to fill in that void on the bottom. Now that the interior has been sanded, I brought the cone up on the live center, and so when this is trued up on the outside, everything should be running true, and everything from the inside to the outside should be true to itself as well. So definitely use tailstock support whenever you can. Even though you may think that, oh, nothing's going to happen here, well, something certainly can. And if you would have had tailstock support in, then in all likelihood it may not have happened. One thing that I probably should have done there was take a little bit of router padding and put it on the end of that the cone, but it didn't mark up the wood anyway. And the last thing I want to do here before I start sanding the outside is to do some shear scraping with the Ellsworth gouge. And you can see those real fine shavings coming off there, and that's exactly what you want. And I'll hold them up to the camera here so you can see them. Nice, light, fluffy shavings. Just like the inside, we're going to sand this from 60 to 180. I've been using sandpaper.ca for over 20 years. They make more than just dimple discs. They have a full line of sandpaper products at a really great price. So sandpaper.ca, check them out. Link in the description below. All right, what I have here is 3 ounces of the Pro Series. It's a 2-to-1, nice and thin, so it flows well. So it's good for this purpose. See you in 10 minutes. Since we're doing this, we're probably going to end up skipping the sealer coat from Waterlux. This does do a good job sealing in a lot of that end grain, but you know, just like usual, the end grain is going to soak up a lot more epoxy than the side grain, and that's no different in this casting either. There you go. One little strip of the gold on the side. Beautiful epoxy. Nice two-tone effect. Resin staining and no resin staining. A little bit more gold on this side. I like it. Do you like the profile? What do you think of the profile? Don't think we've done anything like that. Down inside, yeah, you're not going to be able to see a whole lot down there. One thing that I am going to do is make sure that that hole is filled in before I leave today, because we want that to be filled in so things are nice and solid down there when I go to do the foot. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow. We sand this back and get our first coat of Waterlux on. Let me know what you think. One thing that I really, with the straight lines in this, with that double pour, it's not noticeable. So it's almost like it's meant to be there that way. So if you have to do a double pour in a situation like this, think about orientating it like this. See you tomorrow. Well, good. Well, I guess it's afternoon. I've been working on some other stuff. That's what we're looking at. That hole, for the most part, has been all filled in. I will sand the inside of this, and I will put another epoxy coat on the inside. Yeah, some bubbles, lots of air coming out in that area anyway. Quite a rough texture. A few little runs and sags, no big deal. I'll probably start sanding at 120, go all the way to 800, and then buff it, clean it with the denatured alcohol, and we got our first coat of Waterlux. Always check your chocks, especially if they sat overnight. And that just goes to show you, you know, that like I was talking about earlier in the video, that, you know, I would say that every time I checked the chuck, I got maybe a quarter of a turn on it to, you know, to be tight to where I think that it should be. So anyway, make sure you check that so you don't have pieces come loose on the lathe, especially if you're not using dovetail jaws. That is Tripoli buffing compound, and I'm using a buffing pad from the Beal buffing system. I get all of my buffing pads here from Lee Valley in Canada, and they do ship to the US if you're down there. And of course, we want to clean this off with a denatured alcohol after you drop it on the floor, of course, for the first coat of finish. Right, we're going to be using Waterlux Gloss Original. So if you watch me apply this, I put it on, and then when I dump more onto the rag, when I go back to the piece, I don't typically go right to where I left off. If you do that, then you're probably going to end up with a run or a sag. Once I basically get it all onto the form, then I take a long sweeping stroke like you would when you're putting on polyurethane to get a nice flat, even finish. All right, well, it's going to take 2 coats of this for sure, but I mean, it looks good. Turn this off. Yeah, that's better. The resin staining, the two-tone effect, I like that. So it looks like down inside, it will get one more coat inside, like I said earlier. Yeah, that epoxy is awesome, isn't it? Love it. All right, we'll see you tomorrow for the second coat. Let me know what you think. Well, here we are the next day. I like to show these pieces the next day so you give you an idea of what your finish may look like when you're doing these. Yeah, there's some duller spots in it than some other places. Down inside. Yeah, it still needs its epoxy coat. So we're going to buff this, clean it, and get our second coat on. So this time around we're going to use the Triple E again, and we're going to buff it with that, and then I'm also going to use some 6/0 steel wool on the opening to give the previous coat a tooth for the new coat to adhere to. That's 6/0 steel wool there. Yes, you can buy higher grades than 4. And of course clean it with a denatured alcohol before the next coat of Waterlux. Second coat of Waterlux Gloss Original. Well, there it is after its second coat. Covered very nicely. Two-tone maple right there. Really like that, actually. Used to not be a fan of resin staining, but it's grown on me over the years here. And that epoxy will. That's something else right there. A little bit of chatoyance there, compression grain. Never really noticed that yesterday. Anyway, let me know what you think, and we'll see you when we're doing the foot tomorrow. So after 2 coats are finished, we're ready to take the tenon off the bottom of this. I might still put another coat on it, but I want to give you a kind of a finished bottom for this video. Yeah, minus the finish, but at least the bottom will be finished. Having a vacuum chuck on the inboard side of your lathe is preferred. You can see the mark left there by the live center, so you can bring your tailstock up and line things up perfectly, but of course I'm left-handed and I prefer to do this outboard. All right, well, that's going to do it for the video. Thank you so much to all that have watched the video, especially those who have watched it all the way through. I really do appreciate it. Special shout out to the members. You guys are awesome, and if you want to be a member of my channel, it is $2.99 a month to do so. Let's have a last chat about this beautiful vase. Well, what do you think about this? Yeah, really, I don't know. It really appeals to me. That resin staining, epoxy staining, if you will. Again, a fantastic way to hide a witness line that is not intended. Just orientate your pieces in a different direction. And it all looks natural. So it will all work out in the end. Here is the very bottom. Only sanded on the wood, or signed on the wood, I should say. And as per normal, it's Thursday and I'm out of time. Size on this. It is 7 inches at its widest dimension and 7.5 inches tall. And it's anywhere from 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch in thickness throughout the piece, a little heavier on the bottom. It still needs another coat of epoxy on the inside, and that will fill in the rest of that hole down there. It's probably about 80% filled in now, so the next coat will definitely do that. I don't know if you can see it down there or not in the gold area. But yeah, you know, I really like the look of this, and we may have to do more pieces like this in the future. It should look really cool when it's lit up too, being able to see all the way through it in this orientation. Because usually it's orientated like this. Anyway, let me know if you're interested in this piece. It is for sale. Send me an email to spraguewoodturning@gmail.com and I will disclose the price then in case it is a gift. Don't forget to put designer epoxy in the comments down below to be entered into the next giveaway at 145,000. I see that we're now over 143,000. So thanks to those new subscribers that just recently come on board. Yeah, next week is going to be a stone turning. It's going to be a big chunk of alabaster, and I am going to turn a bowl out of solid alabaster. So I've been working on it, and so far things have not gone to plan. So that's probably, we'll see what kind of entertainment value that brings next week. I'm hoping what I've done now will correct the issues that I've had, and hopefully we'll be able to finish this off, because I think that it's actually going to look pretty neat if I can get it finished and not have it kind of blow up on the lathe. But that's next week, so please come on back for that. Don't forget about Designer Epoxy's big summer sale they got going on, and of course all my other sponsors in the description down below. If you need some stuff, head on down there and put some money back in your pocket. All right, well, that's it. I'm out of here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you back here next week for a cool stone turning. Can't say I ever thought I'd say that.